such a fud.
Well, to be fair, you had a lot to remember, so...
I'll
give you a
did
pass.
quite well, actually.
I'll give you a pass.
I did quite well. For me, that's quite successful. Yeah. Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back to Not Another Whiskey Podcast. We are on episode 16, the grand finale for 2021. And it's going to be a great one as we round off the year. Mitch, did you think we would make the entire 7 months together, recording episodes, spending many an evening together? It's been quite emotional.
It's been quite intimate, but yeah, of course I did, mate. We're like the ant and deck of the Scotch whisky world, you know what I mean? So
I don't know about that. Yeah. It's our final episode of the year, and as I say, we're going to go out with a bang. And we have with us, and we're very lucky to have with us today, the man, the myth, and the legend. A gentleman who has always been very kind to us over the years, certainly in our time in whisky, is Mr. Charles MacLean MBE. Welcome to the show, Charlie.
Thanks, It's very kind.
we had to get the MBE in there, right?
Yeah.
Does that still sound weird, Charlie, when someone says
it does,
that?
yeah.
Brilliant, though.
Yours is in the post, Mitch.
Well, great to see you, Charlie, and thank you so much for letting us into your house and agreeing to be on our wee show. So just to set the scene for everyone listening, we're currently sat in Charlie's house in the heart of Edinburgh, surrounded by some amazing whiskey and his incredible library of whiskey books that Charlie's amassed over the years. Just before we started recording this, Daz and I actually, well, I shouldn't say Daz and I, Daz banged up a few Blood and Sands to get this show going.
Yep.
And Daz actually popped Charlie's cherry on Blood and Sands because you'd never had one before, right, Charlie?
Nope, that's correct.
Yeah.
So,
I'm amazed by that. And I said this to you before, it's my favourite whiskey cocktail. And when I was working in bars here in Edinburgh, if anybody came in and said, I'm not really sure about whiskey, I don't know if I'm going to like it, I'm scared of big smoky flavours or whatever it is, the reasons why people tend not to try whiskey. Blood and Sand's always the drink I used to jump in with. I'm amazed no one's just put one in front of you and gone, Charlie, what do you think?
what are the components for Blood and Sand?
So historically, it's 4 equal measures of sweet vermouth, cherry brandy, Scotch, typically a blend, and orange juice. So the first one I made was with Ardbeg Wee Beastie, which you both weren't a fan of. Thanks, lads. And then we made one, the second one we made, what it normally should call for is a blended Scotch. And we've gone for Adelphi this time. Good pal of mine, Mr. Ryan Chetty, bartender extraordinaire. We used to argue on this bar platform many, many years ago about what the right whiskey for a Blood and Sand was. And I actually still prefer the smoky because it gives it a 4th dimension. You've got bitter in the vermouth, you've got sweet in the cherry, you've got that lovely citrus note in the orange, and then smoke in there, I think, is something that works.
I found the smoke dominated too much. It didn't allow the others to come through. Yeah. This one I think works a bit better.
I think your recommendation is better.
I think it probably needs a slightly higher strength blend.
Fair, yeah.
So Charlie, the whole theme of this episode is Charlie MacLean's guide to drinking whiskey over Hogmanay, right? So where are we going to put this Blood and Sand into your drinking agenda?
Breakfast the following morning. Breakfast New Year's morning.
This is a wee hangover.
Well, I think that little bit of citrus, it cleans the mouth, sharpens you up a little bit, and it's not challenging, right? It's an easygoing drink.
Yeah. By the way, just to explain to anyone listening from abroad that may not have been to Scotland, Hogmanay is what we call New Year's Eve or New Year's celebration in Scotland. So that's what we're talking about. And also, if someone's listening that hasn't really heard of Charlie MacLean before, maybe you've been living under a whiskey rock all your life and don't understand who Charlie is, we're going to do a little introduction to Charlie and what he's achieved.
This will be embarrassing.
Well, it's not going to be embarrassing, Charlie. So Charlie has spent the last 40 years writing and teaching about Scotch whiskey. He's written 19 books on the subject. He is the most well-known figure across the globe when it comes to whiskey. And I would say the most popular as well, right, Daz?
Yeah, I think so.
100%, 100%. I realise how popular Charlie is because whenever we go to lunch together, the waiter or waitress always wants a selfie because one of Charlie's claims to fame, not only for the amazing stuff he's done within the whiskey industry, but also within a little bit of Hollywood, being one of the main characters in a film you might have seen called The Angel Share.
Yeah.
Remember this, Charlie? Last time we were having lunch, I had to get a selfie with the waiter.
That's right.
Very kind of cool.
What made me laugh was, I think one time I'd come over and I think there was, you'd been sent a picture or a pin badge of a silhouette of yourself with a monocle and a moustache.
That's right. Yeah,
and it was the logo for Charlie's Bars.
My 2 bars in Beijing and Hangzhou. Yeah. They're not mine, by the way.
They're not yours. That's right. But they've used your
face.
face. Yeah.
But that is where we're going to do the next episode of this podcast. Right? Is over there with you in one of your bars in Beijing.
Splendid. When we're allowed to go there.
Sounds all right. Yeah, exactly. It might be a year or two, but what's there? But it's true, isn't it? It's not just books. It's movies. I think, do you know what it is? It's about getting people excited about whiskey. And I think that's something you've always been quite clear on, is it's very inclusive, whiskey, Charlie. And I think that's something that it seems to motivate you. You're a raconteur, of course, but you're always willing to sit down with someone and get them into whiskey. It's not always about how many staves are in a washback, what types of yeasts were used. Much more sociable, much more inclusive than that.
I hope so. I mean, I drink for a living, and and I like to share my enthusiasm with other people and introduce them to whiskey. And pertinent to this, what we're going to be talking about is the difference between most of my work is with analysing and assessing quality and writing tasting notes and what have you, and but so in other words, it's all about appreciation.
Yeah.
What we're going to be talking about today, I think, is more to do with pure enjoyment. You know, and I do make a point that whiskey should be enjoyed any way you like.
Yeah.
You know, blood and sand or anything you like, ice, soda, whatever you like. But the enjoyment, and I mean, it's well, we all know what wonderful pleasure whiskey brings, and we want to spread the word and to encourage others to understand it and appreciate it and enjoy it.
Yeah, no, that's it. So not only whiskey though, you've done a lot of other things, and I'm just going to blast through a couple of things that people might not know about yourself, Charlie, and maybe you don't actually. I'm not sure.
Or I can't remember.
Yeah. You've got a degree in art history, a degree in law. Is that right? Or correct. Art history and law, or is it separate?
Follow separate degree.
Yeah. You're a writer to Her Majesty's Signet.
Yep.
You're a fellow of the Society of Antiquaries of Scotland.
I was. I think I've been expelled.
No, have you?
I haven't kept up my annual payments. So I was. Yeah.
Yeah. Visiting lecturer to the Smithsonian Institution. Mm-hmm. Honorary Fellow of Massey College, University of Toronto and Champlain College, apologies. A counsellor to the Clan Maclean and a member of the Society of Authors. And to top that all off, in June 2021, you were very proud to receive the MBE from the Queen for your services to Scotch, which is fantastic.
Services to Scotch whisky, UK exports and charity. And really the charity thing was largely to do with my sons, who we might talk about later. But
we'll come on to those boys.
So I think that MBE stands for My Boys' Efforts.
Is it? Well, that is very humble of you.
How was that? Can I ask? Like when you meeting the Queen?
I haven't met the Queen yet. No.
Because of COVID, that didn't happen.
Yeah. I haven't actually got the gong pinned on my breast. So I've got a lapel badge. So I mean, I've officially got it, but I haven't actually been given it.
So you can't wear it on the right side or the left side?
It's usually, I think it's on the right side, because the military medals and stuff are on the heart side, on the left side, and I think it's on the other side, the right side.
Yeah, because just to explain, you can only wear a medal on the right side if the Queen gives you it. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Michael Urquhart told me that the last time we were chatting about Keepers of the Quake. Because he corrected me because I had my Keepers of the Quake on my right side.
And he's like, know that.
You need to move that to your left side. You can only put it on your right side if the Queen gives you it.
Yeah, but then you see, it comes from the Queen. You see, I had 3 choices: either to go to Buckingham Palace and get this done, or to Holyrood by a member of the royal family, and or it can be done by the Lord Lieutenant, in this case the Lord Lieutenant of Edinburgh, who happens to also ex officio being the Lord Provost. and I met him at an event, and he said, "Oh, do please come and get me to do it, because as the Queen's representative, because you can have a party. You can bring 12 guests and have drinks. You see, before it doesn't take a moment to get pinned on, but So you see, but as the Queen, so it's the Queen or the Queen's representative.
Yeah.
So I think that you're right that something like the Keeper's Medal would not bestowed by the Queen. It had to be on the left-hand side. But I think that the Queen, even the MBE has to be on the, I beg your pardon, on the right-hand side. I think so.
Yeah.
I need to check it out.
But you've mentioned something important, which I didn't list and you haven't mentioned, which I'll just cover off. We're both keepers of the Quake. Charlie is a superior being to us. You're a master of the Quake.
I'm a master.
Yeah. Do we have to bow to you, kiss a ring, or?
You had to. I was keeper in 1992, and in those days, you had to have done 10 years good service for the Scotch whisky industry to be eligible to become a keeper. And so, as you say, I started writing about whisky in 1981. So but then the being elevated to master is entirely, nobody knows how it happens. It's entirely done by the organization itself.
Yeah.
But for very long service, and I was made a master in
2009.
Thank you very much, Daz. That's great. Yeah.
We do our research on this show, Charlie.
Well, it's funny actually, because I'm not sure I got it for 10 years good service to whiskey. I think I did 9 bad years and 1 good year. Yeah.
I just felt sorry for you.
Yeah, totally.
He keeps hassling us.
He stuck around for long enough, has it?
I always remember a good friend of mine. He's like, getting keepered, you can never ask for it. That's like asking for.
That's where I've been going wrong all these years.
Probably cut that bit out.
Yeah.
We can leave it in. I don't know. We'll see how we go.
Yeah. Well, look, 2020 and 2021 have been quite unusual for everybody. How was 2021 for you, Charlie? There's a few things going on. You had a big birthday bash and a few other things happening.
Well, actually, it started in 2020 because I had been asked to commission to write a book in 2019. In the year 2019, I was 23 times abroad in 17 countries.
Yeah. And
I hadn't even looked at the book, hadn't even begun to think about it. I mean, between the 1st of September and the 30th of November that year, I spent only 10 nights in my own bed. And unfortunately, I can't say I spent it in anybody else's bed. But
that's a record that you should be proud of.
But I hadn't. So I tried to get out of it, to be honest. And but the publisher says no. And so in the end, Gavin Smith and I agreed to do the book together. And then, of course, came the lockdown, which was brilliant because it gave us both something to do. And the working title is A History of Whisky in 100 Objects. And we delivered in June that year, 2020. And then, it continued in this year, 2021. And the upshot of this, I've written 5 books. 2 of them were quite short. They were one was to accompany a very ancient bottle of Glen Grant, 1949, I think, for Gordon and MacPhail, and one was a bottle, or a pair of bottles actually, of Karazawa, and so on. And then I wrote a little book about blended Scotch for the International Wine and Food Society, which is great fun, and then, on top of that, I've been doing a lot of Zoom calls, and also kept going really with writing tasting notes. I do a lot of tasting notes for Diageo, for independent bottlers, for the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, etc., etc. And writing
with Gavin must be fun. He's got a good sense of humour.
Oh, he's got a terrific sense of humour.
Yeah, and you and I and Gavin, I think it was in 2015. We went over to Jerez as a group. Remember, he got food poisoning.
That's right.
Yeah, and he was sitting at the end of the table,
the poor
and he was white, and he was literally had sweat dripping down his face. And we just had to send him to bed, didn't we?
That was a McAllen trip, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was with Ken. We went with Ken
yeah.
and Marchin, and there was Ian.
It's such a shame because
I felt for him because I really enjoyed his company. And the thing is with him, he's got such a dry,
really
sense of humour,
Yeah.
and he's a smart man. He thinks differently, doesn't he? And I love his writing style as well.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, he's a nice guy to have a couple of whiskies with. And what about podcast? How many podcasts have you done? Do you think?
I don't really do that many podcasts.
Yeah,
but I would think probably, maybe a dozen.
Yeah.
But many more Zoom calls.
Lots of those. Yeah.
Talking to corporate Zoom calls and clubs and what have you. And I think Zoom is here to stay. I mean, it doesn't replace the face-to-face and the, hopefully when travel is opened up again, I'll spend again more time. In the last few years, I spent a lot of time in China.
Yeah.
And which is going great guns. It really is. It's doing terribly well, and as a whiskey market.
Yeah.
And and so it won't replace that.
No.
But I've done various product launches for various brand owners, to China to press or VIPs in China and so on. But so I think that the Zooms they're here to stay, and it is a great way of reaching out to the disparate markets.
My observation with Zooms and virtual things is that they're great if you know the person already. Certainly from like a producer's point of view, like going and meeting distributors or customers or people who are just buying whiskey. If you've met them before, these things are brilliant because it's a great way just to reconnect. I find it a little bit more difficult if you're meeting someone for the first time and you're trying to build a rapport. Meeting people in real life, you can't replace the connections and bonding and stuff that happen in those kind of real life scenarios.
I think, we've chatted about this a lot, right?
Yeah.
And us all being whiskey boys that are all very sociable, I think it has been hard having that virtual first time meeting and still doing that. You don't get that connection. I think the big thing is we all like going for a whiskey afterwards, right? After the meeting, and that's what you can't necessarily do after Zoom. It's like click, see you later, go downstairs and get the
But you see,
TV
most of my Zooms it's whiskey throughout. It involves a tasting, and if it doesn't involve a tasting, well, I'm certainly tippling away. The whiskey community, as we all know, is such a convivial. And if everybody's had a few, then it makes it even easier. You can be a bit more, and being completely independent. I can be open and I'm not. I don't have to toe a corporate line.
Yeah.
And just given my I know which way my bread's buttered, so I would never badmouth a whiskey company or a particular brand.
Yeah.
But But aside of that,
But you're allowed an opinion. You're allowed an opinion, right? You don't have to
absolutely.
love everything. You can't possibly do that. It's,
So getting on to drinking whiskey, which is what we're here to do, and talk about Hogmanay as well.
Yeah.
Get back on track here, boys.
Yeah.
Let's chat about the Hogmanay drams. Charlie.
Can we do something first?
What do you want to do first?
Sorry,
guys?
I've been thinking about this for quite a while. Before we get on to Hogmanay, right? You've got three lads. Good strapping young chaps. They've achieved a lot, and we're going to come on to those, but they weren't always big, strong, young men. They were young children at one point. And Santa used to come down the chimney and visit those boys, I'm sure, once upon a time. And what whiskey do you leave out for Santa Claus? I've been thinking about this because my kids are asking me all the time, Dad, what are we going to leave out for Santa? We're going to leave a carrot for the reindeers, of course. I'll leave Santa a mince pie. And then I'm just like, I'll just chuck a whiskey down. But now they're at the age, they can communicate, 9 and 5. They're asking me, what whiskey? What whiskey? Dad, are you going to give them, you've got Highland Park. Do you give them Highland Park? Are you going to give them whatever else it is that might be lying about? What does Charlie MacLean leave out for Santa Claus? Yeah.
Sounded like sherry.
There we go.
After all that, Daz, you didn't get your answer.
I know. That's a good answer. I'm happy with that answer, by the way. Yeah.
I like sherry as well, I must say. But I would leave a dram out. But when the boys were very wee, and I was doing these tastings. I remember one occasion, for example, when Ewan, the oldest boy, is now 29, and he was probably about 6, I should think 6 or 7. And I was doing a tasting with Jamie Walker, who owned Adelphi in those days, and we were looking at these whiskies, cask selecting and so on. And he came in and said, "Daddy, what are you doing?" I said, "We're tasting whiskey." And I handed him a glass and said, "Look, smell that and tell me what you think you can smell." And he was an earnest little boy, and he smelled it very earnestly, and then he said, "It smells like your jacket." And he was talking about Jamie was wearing a heavy tweed jacket, and we had tweed down as one of our descriptors.
That's cool. Yeah.
And Jamie Middleboy, he's an extremely good amateur cook, and he's worked in restaurants in Edinburgh, and he's got an extremely good nose, and so they don't drink that much whiskey. Kids of their generation drink more vodka and mainly Tennant's Lager and Buckfast or Eldorado. But nevertheless, they're familiar. They've been familiar with whiskey. There was a terrible occasion when there was a party, an adult party. I think it was a bonfire night or something like that out at Hill End when I lived there, and I had a bottle of, I remember it was Black Bottle. And Ewan, aged probably about 10 by that stage, and he was, pouring, large drams for his wee friends, as a result, of course, they were extremely ill, or he was extremely ill, and my wife thought that you're going to turn our boys into alcoholics. I say, on the contrary. They'll probably this will, like many kids in Scotland, especially at New Year. They have an overdose, and then some of them never want whiskey again.
And it's often the first thing that I don't know why. I remember growing up.
It happened with me.
It happened with me, grouse. I remember it. I mean, and I remember it. My dad was away. My dad was a mariner, so he was away often. And I went to boarding school, a military boarding school up in Dunblane, Queen Victoria. So I'd come home on leave, basically, and spend time at home. My dad would be at sea. So, at night, I'd sneak a couple of little drams in, and I'd get a wee grouse and a wee juice or whatever it was that was knocking about. And
how old were you?
Oh, mate, I don't know. Probably 11.
12,
12, I don't know. Yeah, and I quite liked the taste. But obviously the feel, I never drank enough, I don't think, to feel it, because I was always quite cautious. But yeah, the taste, I was actually, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. I wanted to be grown up, that was all. I think that was probably the motivation behind it, yeah.
For me, it really turned me off because I think I was about 15 and it was a quarter bottle of Co-op whiskey. Downed in 2 gulps.
Oh, God.
Yeah, exactly. It did the job of what I wanted to do back in the day, but then after that, I was like, I'm not touching that shit ever again. Until now, obviously.
So now that we've covered that Santa drinks sherry,
you've talked enough about Santa. You sure?
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy now. Right, what do we do at Hogmanay? So Hogmanay, of course, it's our New Year's Eve. It's a.
Tell me about Hogmanay. I know that you've been doing a little bit of research.
I had to do some before I came here because you're a historian. You know lots about lots of things, and I thought I should do some reading on actually where did the word Hogmanay come from, because in Scotland, I always tell people, especially when I go abroad, they're like, "Oh, what's Christmas like in Scotland?" It's like, "Oh, Christmas is good, but Hogmanay is better." Like we celebrate
within my lifetime, certainly. I mean, people worked on Christmas morning.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then they take 2 days off for Hogmanay and New Year's Day and the day after.
Yeah, and I always remember the fanfare around New Year of we used to go first footing. There were rules around that. You'd take a lump of coal. Whoever, my dad's taller than me. He's got dark hair. So a tall, dark, handsome man had to be the first person that kind of crossed the threshold, if you like. And there was all these little rituals. You had to have a drink, and there was all these wonderful things. So for me, my memory is that New Year was a bigger occasion than Christmas. So I just had a quick Google search and I had a little look around just to see what the story was. So Hogmanay, the word, there are many kind of sort of theories as to where it came from. But actually, almost all of them go back to a translation of some sort from French or from Anglo-Saxon. So Normandy seems to be the one that is the most likely source. And I don't speak French, but Huguenot seems to be where Hogmanay comes from. And it was all during the Reformation here in Scotland. And Christmas was actually seen as a Catholic celebration.
Ah, interesting.
And that's why
Hogmanay would be maybe Huguenots.
Yeah, which makes sense. So more sort of Protestant. So the celebration of Christmas was actually not the case here in Scotland for about 400 years. And Hogmanay was focused on much more, and there was a month almost celebration welcoming in the new year. And I think that seems to be where some of these traditions and customs come from in terms of the first footing and all these little bits and pieces that get added onto all of that. They had solid origins, and a lot of it was down to religion, back in Reformation times.
That is very interesting, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
It does make sense.
It makes sense as to why we get absolutely mashed.
Hammered.
Yeah, right.
Well, especially if you've got a month off. Yeah. Now we only get the second off. It's not enough.
So, New Year's story, Charlie.
Well,
what's your advice for anyone?
Well, I spent my formative years on the Isle of Arran, down in the south end of the Isle of Arran, Kildonnan, where my family still have, my brother has it now, a cottage very close to the beach. Now, the New Year, so always our New Years were spent on Arran, and like many other places in Scotland, especially in those days, in the 60s, 70s, the very traditional New Year. And as you say, as you were saying, the tradition is that you make sure you're in your own house for the bells. Indeed, it's always superstitious about the see you after the bells, or see you, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But we were always in the pub before we'd have a meal. We'd go down to the pub, which was very close, and but then you come back to the house. Everybody would go back to their own homes for the bells for midnight, and then people would start wandering around. First footing, clutching a bottle of whiskey, and if you were being very traditional, a piece of coal and a black bun or something.
Black bun, because it was good luck. It was
yeah.
to share
food and heat.
Yeah. Is that why the coal is there? Is it?
Yeah.
I never even thought of that.
Yeah. So and then we would always go. We would go around. We would go to the older people in the village. It wasn't really a village; it was more a parish, and it's scattered around. So we'd totter off to see, and then, as you say, the cousin, oh, hello, come in, how nice to see you, as if they're surprised. You see, but this time it's about 12:30 or 1 o'clock. An old lady, and how are you, and how are your parents, and all this sort of stuff, and then it's almost like an afterthought. So, would you like a dram? You see, and oh, that's very kind of you. And so we'd have you receive a dram from the house first, and then we're clanking with bottles, of course.
Yeah.
And then you pour it, and in this case, she would put it on the mantelpiece for drinking later, and then we'd go on to the next place where there was a farm where there was always a legendary New Year party. A lot of people would go there soon after the bells, so like about 2 o'clock or whatever, and again, you'd receive a dram, and then you'd give a dram to the whole company, and then the whole company would give you a dram, and there maybe, there could be 20 people in the company, so by dawn, you're and there's always food, sort of lashing sandwiches and cake and things like that.
Stovies. They do stovies now.
Yeah, stovies. Yeah.
Stovies, classic.
But mainly it was sort of big sandwiches and Christmas cake and so on. So and then you'd carry on, and you'd look for houses with lights on. Houses with lights on meant they were sort of receiving people, and because the tradition was that you had to visit all your friends, and they had to visit you.
Yeah.
And so so you're out pretty well all night, and and then you continued to. I remember people coming to the house on the 5th of January, and they hadn't slept in their own bed since the bells. truly. And
amazing.
And literally, you'd give them a dram and a big sandwich, and then they would fall asleep in the chair, and then they'd sleep maybe for 2 or 3 hours, and then they would
go to the next house.
They would wake up, drink that dram, and go on to the next place. It was it was terrific. But anyway, so get with that background, my first and most serious tip is not to kick off too hard early on.
Yeah.
And I've seen terrible casualties, friends who would come and didn't know the ropes, and they get tore in, and they start drinking hard in the early evening on Hogmanay, and
peaked too soon, right?
and they peak too soon. Yeah. Exactly that. So I think so I would go steady on the drams, and I would stick to whiskey, for goodness sake, because nowadays it's changed, because people you're sometimes offered rum, or you might be offered gin or beer or whatever. Beer and whiskey go well together, but but whiskey and water's your man. You know and I generally, certainly for this sort of occasion, I would drink fairly dilute, and I would go for pre the bells, I would go for a lighter style of whiskey, a lowland malt possibly, or a blend. And and we were talking about, you mentioned the Adelphi blend. Well, I was involved in putting that together with Jamie Walker, and I could drink it like mother's milk, so it has no effect on me at all.
Brilliant.
And but I've got a glass of this just as a refresher in my hand.
Refresher, love it.
But for an occasion like Hogmanay, the one that I've chosen here is from King's Barnes Distillery, Lowland malt. This actually is a bit of a surprise for me, because it's a sherry style whiskey. It's been matured. Well, let me have a look at
So this one actually, it is sherried in style, but actually it's Portuguese wine casks. This one.
Is it really?
It is, yeah. So what they've done is they've recharred it effectively. They've rejuvenated it.
STR, yeah, barrique.
And I think it was the last year's Distillery Reserve product. They've just launched another one. But what I love about it, despite the fact that it's got quite a lot of influence, obviously, from these wine casks, flavour-wise, it does everything as you say. It's got that lovely light creaminess. It's got lovely citrus notes coming through. It's not heavy and claggy. You know, it's almost a refreshing. If you like, yeah, and it is, and I love that idea of malts for times of the day, because I think historically people have always thought of malt whiskey as the last drink of the night.
Yeah.
Whereas in fact, as you say, Charlie, and I agree completely, is pick whiskies for the time of day. You could drink whiskey throughout. You know, you don't have to have a beer or a wine or whatever. You can go for a nice lowland early afternoon, or early evening, and then move on to something a bit heavier if you want, you know, later on in the night.
Hello, it's Mike here from King's Barnes Distillery, and we're absolutely delighted to be sponsoring the Not Another Whiskey podcast. Just in case you didn't know, we're a lowland single malt distillery which prides itself on being the spirit of the Kingdom of Fife, using only local barley from the sun-soaked fields surrounding the distillery. Our spirit is remarkably clean, light, but complex due to our fermentation and distillation process. Then it's matured in specially selected barrels to create a smooth, flavoursome, yet complex whiskey. Dream to Dram was our first ever public single malt. It's multi-award winning, including Best Scotch Lowland Single Malt at last year's World Whisky Awards. And joining the family in 2020, we have Balcomi, our 100% Oloroso American Oak Sherry Butt matured single malt. To find out more about King's Barnes Distillery and buy our whiskey, please do visit www.kingsbarnesdistillery.com. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Yeah, I remember, we're thinking about blends for a moment. I remember Brown Ivory, who was the former CEO of Edrington, he said that the way he liked it, well, obviously his brand was Famous Grouse.
Yeah.
And take a long, tall glass, fill it with ice, block ice, fill it right up to the top with in this case, Famous Grouse. And this is, for me, it's more a summer drink, you know, and then it gradually melts, and so, you know, you get a bit of a hit to start with, but then it gradually melts away. So, you know, I'm not a great fan of I know that the whiskey and soda is now quite popular. I've never been a fan of whiskey and soda, and even less of that ghastly drink, whiskey and lemonade, which was very popular on the West Coast.
Well, it was very popular. I mean, I remember going to social clubs as a young lad, with my granddad ran pubs, actually in Corby of all places, but he was from Cowdenbeath. You know, he's Corby being little Scotland, and he had pubs, you know, proper pubs, and you'd go into these places and whiskey and lemonade, because it was a huge Scottish contingent down there, and a lot from the West Coast actually as well. They drank whiskey and lemonade a lot.
Well,
and the other thing they drank, which is funny, sorry to interject, rum and pep.
Oh yes, rum and pep. That was supposed to settle the.
Well, I'm not sure about that. Yeah.
But and in bars in Glasgow and in Ireland, I mean, there would be, you know, along with the water on the bar, there would be a bottle of lemonade. Yeah. And you know, you slosh the lemonade in, and a lot of people like their whiskey and lemonade, or ginge. They called it ginger.
Ginger.
Any kind of fizzy drink was a mixer.
Like a whiskey and ginger.
I need to say as well, if anyone's listening from the US, we're not talking about lemonade that you guys have over there. We're talking about 7-Up, Sprite, that kind of style. It's very different over there. So Charlie, highballs aren't inspiring you right now within the whiskey industry, but what's you know, a brand or some kind of movement right now that's going on in the whiskey industry that's inspiring you?
I think the industry is turning more towards what I would describe as drinking for enjoyment. You know, so it's not, you know, I'm a bit of a purist actually, and so I especially with malt whiskey, I would drink malt whiskey, but I would almost invariably add water, but I wouldn't add ice, I wouldn't add let alone mixers. But you know, I can see that it's a sensible move to open it up to non whiskey drinkers to say, hey, you can drink it how you like. Well, we're going to be trying this blood and sand later on. I mean, the cocktails, whatever. But so the key message is the industry's key message is drink it as you like. You know. I don't have it would be invidious of me to mention specific brands of either blend or malt. But then one of the things I would say, many of your listeners will be malt heads, and never despise blended Scotch whiskey. Yeah. Most of my work is with malt whiskey, and I esteem it highly. But when I reach for a dram, as I invariably do at about 6 o'clock in the evening, sometimes a bit earlier, I want a blend, and and I get a discount on the Adelphi, but
I think you get a discount on a lot of whiskey.
But I think over the years though, we've spent a bit of time together over the years, and the times we have spent together, gone to a pub. You've taken me around to K's before. We've met in various places around the world actually. Once in Latvia, we did a ship-ass thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Hey, remember what stays in Latvia?
Yeah, what stays in Latvia. Well, there's a couple of good stories from Latvia, but is you always reach for a blend, and actually it kind of opened my eyes a little bit, because I was maybe moving in that direction. I used to work for Diageo, so I was always a big fan of Johnny Black label, as I know you are.
Johnny Black is my. I think, you know, if I'm on record as saying that if it was a desert I had only one, it'd be Johnny Walker Black Label, and I think it's a cracking blend. But blended whiskey is. But
you've reached for Grouse, you've reached for Black Bottle. I've been with you when you've been consuming that, indeed. and it's one of those. It's great actually, because sometimes I think there is certainly a tendency to sort of discount the blends. But they're almost just filling space. It's like. No. These things are fantastic, you know, especially when you speak to the blenders. We've had a couple on. We were chatting recently with Brendan McCarran's a great example.
Great guy.
And he's a massive fan of blends, and we had a really good conversation with him about, you know, that topic, you know, let's not discount them, don't discredit them.
And you opened my eyes to Black Bottle as well, because back in the day, Malt Advocate course, I remember asking you about outside of Diageo, because it was Diageo at the time, in the Diageo course, what would you drink? And you were like, Black Bottle. Great
and Black Bottle has gone through various incarnations, and but Black Label, Johnny Walker Black Label, has been really pretty steady,
consistent, right?
Yeah. But I think for the reason for this, I mean, most of my work, as I say, is with malt whiskey. Give me a malt whiskey, and I'm immediately in work mode. I'm smelling it, and I'm tasting it, and thinking, analysing it, and so on. With a blend, it's just down the hatch. You know,
Responsibly, of course.
Responsibly.
with a big smile.
Whatever that means.
Yeah.
We're all still trying to find this guy called Moderation that you meant to drink.
Yeah. So our recommendation then on Hogmanay, first whiskey, we're going to go for a lowland. We're going to go for something that's delicious, easy drinking, and a good alternative is a great blend.
Yeah.
Happy with that.
Exactly.
All right, so we moved on. We're in New Year's Day. We've had our King's Barnes for our noon dram. Moving into a sundowner. What are you going to...
Yeah, so I think that in the lead up to the bells, and again, I would recommend that you have some food.
Yes, that's a good idea.
That really is quite important.
Not unreasonable.
And the prior to the bells, and I like to drink wine with food rather than whiskey with food, to be honest. But and I find wine goes very well with whiskey. As a matter of fact, I know especially red wine. I know where I am.
That's interesting, Charlie, because it gives me the worst hangover.
Yeah. Does it?
Yeah. Wine and whiskey. I'm like, I can do one glass of wine and one dram, and the next day I've got a hangover from hell.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
It's I don't know if maybe it's psychological. I heard that grain and grape thing doesn't work, but for me it definitely doesn't work.
I just don't drink wine.
What do you do between the end of supper and the bells, and midnight? Well, the one we're looking at is a Glenmorangie, and it's this particular one. What is it called?
Lighthouse.
The Lighthouse. This is a new release from Glenmorangie, and and it's a lovely light. What you're looking for, you don't want anything too heavy or too obvious. Obvious in the sense of being sherried style or smoky style.
So this is it's a limited edition. They only made 3,000 bottles of this to celebrate the launch of their Lighthouse distillery
the new
innovation piece.
Which, to be fair, we didn't know about until we walked into Charlie's house.
I've never seen it before. Totally. So we've cracked it. Thanks, Charlie. 80% bourbon, 20% sherry. So a little bit richer than your classic Glenmoe 10. So a little bit more time and a little bit more.
And it's 12 years old, isn't it?
This is a 12-year-old. And the nice thing is as well, actually, it's 48%. So it's got a little bit of oomph about it. I actually...
It's got really nice, doesn't it?
I love it. I'm really pleased with it.
And this is obviously to celebrate Dr. Bill's new castle lighthouse that he's built overlooking...
Yeah, on the site. Yeah.
Have you been up to that yet?
I've been invited, but I haven't yet seen it. I've seen it from the outside, but I haven't yet visited.
It looks amazing.
But no, it's great, and they're going to do a lot of experimental distillations in there. But you see, it's a lovely light whiskey, easy drinking.
I find it quite limey, almost like lime. like lime marmalade.
So
roses.
Palate cleansing, very good after the meal.
Yeah.
Which wouldn't necessarily be haggis, but in fact, hopefully not. But the your New Year meal, but it's line. Eat plenty, line the stomach. I
do like what Glenmorangie are doing at the moment. I think top kind of brands out there for advertising and what they're doing, Glenmorangie's up there for me. It's very kind of new school. They're pushing things forward with the way I suppose advertising should be with Scotch whisky. I don't know how you feel about that, Charlie, but I think it's really cool what they're doing at the moment.
Some of the traditional brands are linking themselves very much to other. I mean, look at Macallan and Aston Martin or whatever, Lalique, etc. Luxury. So they're positioning themselves as luxury goods rather than drinks. A lot of the newbies, the newcomers, are of course taking an entirely different route, and they're going very much on the craft route. And they're very concerned and interested about barley varieties, about yeast varieties, about. I mean, obviously the proof is in the pudding and the final flavour profile of the product, but I must say I feel more comfortable. I can understand from a marketing point of view in certain markets China or Asia in general, where you make this association with luxury goods and the. But from a, I mean, whiskey's to be drunk. It's to be enjoyed. It's not to be invested in. It's not a sort of fast-moving white good or whatever it is. And so the industry seems to be kind of split in terms of how to position their products. And some are going some way, some are going both ways, of course. But I'm sure that you'd agree. I think we'd all agree that we enjoy whiskey, we enjoy the drink, and we don't really give too much of a damn as to whether it was associated with Aston Martin or Lalique or whatever.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was going to say as well, the other thing, and I know you're a big advocate of this, is as long as it gets people drinking the liquid, right?
Yeah.
And gets people interested in whether that's luxury or doing something different or just bringing drinkers in there in a new and interesting way. That's going to be beneficial for everyone.
But it's interesting that that there was a shift after the downturn in 2008, where the stock markets all went flat and so on, and then suddenly investors, deep pockets, began to realise that actually Scotch whisky was probably a better investment than wine, because wine it can change. It's obviously changing in the bottle and so on, and the wine prices, first growth clarets, for example, very highly rated, but whisky's safer, and so now you've seen these astronomical climbs in value of single bottles and casks of malt whiskey on the market but you see, the trouble is that there's nothing you can do about it. But the investors have deep pockets. So previously you had the consumer and the collector would buy and they would swap, they would exchange, and and that was the established market. But now when the investors come in and they're prepared to pay huge money for individual bottles, and I mean, Maclean is the leading example. The Beaumont, Dalmore,
Of course,
Probably Maclean and Dalmore are the leading examples. And Brora, and there are certain makes that have achieved and will presumably continue to achieve eye-watering prices at auction, but it does rather distort the market, particularly from the perspective of the consumer or the collector, because they cannot afford to pay £1.2 million for a bottle of Maclean and Dalmore. But there's nothing you can do about it. You to some extent you have to embrace it in the sense that it puts Scotch on the map. They're amongst very wealthy people.
So I got a question for you, Charlie. I mean, I remember a point where back in our Diageo days, Daz, going into the staff shop, picking up a bottle of Port Ellen first release for £25, right? And drinking it. And now I look at that and I'm like, holy shit, I should never have drunk that. But Charlie, you must have even better examples of that. And I know you always want to drink your whiskey, but there must be one bottle that you're like, holy shit, I shouldn't have cracked that.
Yeah, because you must have done it. I mean, you must have got your hands on some really interesting stuff in the early 2000s, even the late 90s, which is now gold dust. I mean, almost.
Yeah,
like,
well, I mean,
is there one bottle?
No, but I'll tell you a story about that in a moment. But that first edition of Port Ellen, the 2001, I think it was released, the first special release of Port Ellen, £95 was the RRP, and I sent a bottle of that. Thank you for services rendered, and that is probably going for about £3,000 at auction, something like that, And I've got a little bottle over here, tiny little bottle, of a whiskey called Dalruan, Now, Dallaroon Distillery was a Campbelltown distillery, and it was terminated in 1923. This particular bottle was from 1896, and a friend of mine was going to put it up for auction. He had a clutch of very valuable bottles. I mean, Macleans, old Macleans, and so on. And before he came up here to hand it over to Bonhams, and he wanted to photograph his bottles, and he had a pile of books on his kitchen table to take a photograph, and the bottle of Dallaroon fell and smashed.
No.
Yeah, and he got the picture of the label, but it smashed. And then he put the residue that he could collect from the table into a tiny little square Kilner jar.
Wow.
And he had the label in which he shrunk down, stuck it on. And so when he came up and to hand over the bottles, he gave me this little this tiny sample of this very rare whiskey, Dallaroon. Well, I phoned around to some of the auction houses and I said, well, have you ever seen Dallaroon? Christie's had managed to see one in 1988 or something like that, but it was completely unknown, And price was impossible. There's no. I mean, it's beyond price. In other words, and so here was I with this little bottle. And then the Scotch Whisky Experience got in touch with me not long after that, or maybe 6 months or so after. And they said, look, we're doing a series of little films about people talking about the whiskey you never opened. That was the idea. Lovely idea, actually. And so I said, I know exactly the one. So they sent somebody down. So the first frame, very close up, the label, Dallaroon, and voiceover. This is an extraordinary rare whiskey. In fact, there's only been one bottle known, and it was Campbelltown whiskey, and blah blah blah. And then, of course, they pulled back and they realised that this is only a tiny bottle. But he says, I say, but I'm going to open it now and taste it before you. So I did, and it was absolutely astonishing because it was incredibly floral. You'd expect Campbelltown whiskies to be. It was quite pale in colour, but but you'd expect Campbelltown whiskies to be oily, fishy. The usual sort of grubby, which we love. Springbank and Glen Scotia. So, they're not clean. Speyside.
Yeah, they're not zesty. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And this was absolutely mind blowing. It was. Never tasted anything like it. It was quite light. Obviously, the strength was obviously quite low, but it was a most remarkable whiskey,
And it's such a shame that the guy smashed it. So tell me, when he smashed it, was he hanging out with you prior on Hogmanay?
No.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank God not.
Yeah, not responsible.
He did it in London before he came up. How embarrassing that would be.
Absolute nightmare. Yeah. So getting back to Hogmanay, Charlie, right? We're getting to the bells.
Yes,
we've kind of done our noon dram, our sundowner dram, and we're getting to the bells in Scotland. Everything's going crazy. We're doing that countdown as we always do in someone's house. What's the dram you're going to turn to?
Well, to some extent, it depends upon whether you're in your own house or in another person's house. If you're in another person's, as I mentioned earlier on, you carry around a bottle of blended Scotch and pour it away. If you're in your own house, well, it's worthy. Thanks. It's worthy of. It's celebration, if you're just sloshing it down, then blend is fine. Blend is probably best.
yeah, totally. You'll save yourself a few quid anyway.
Blend with a lot of water, you save yourself a hangover in the morning.
And that's why we have decanters in Scotland, right? We created that so no one knows what it is we're giving out.
Yeah. But But if you're celebrating the new year, you want a special whiskey, and I think also you want. I would say that you want a whiskey with a big flavour, and I'm talking about either a smoky whiskey or a sherry style whiskey. I mean, the one that we're looking at here is a Lagavulin. I have to say that Lagavulin 16 is my favourite Islay malt, and I've been privileged to taste an awful lot of them. And
Told you, Daz.
I adore.
Yeah, Daz and I have this argument all the time, Charlie. There you go, I'm right.
Well, I'm going to keep it in the family because I've always been a big fan of Kalila, and I like the cleaner, lighter style.
Yeah.
I do, and it's funny because you mentioned earlier, Pierrick, whose name is on this bottle, was a distillery manager at Kalila, and now he's at Lagavulin. So maybe now that he's there, I might start liking Lagavulin a little bit more. Yeah.
But the interesting thing is that, of course, the mash, the peated grain that they use, the malts, the degree of peating that they specify, is precisely the same for Lagavulin.
It's the same
Kalila.
product that goes to each distillery, but how it's treated within each distillery is obviously it changes there.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
It really is extraordinary.
They're so different
yeah.
from one another.
Yeah.
In so many ways. Yeah.
But I didn't want to. They're very mysterious about the cask profiles. I'm sure that Lagavulin, generally the standard Lagavulin is the 16-year-old, has a bit of sherry cask. Maureen Robinson doesn't like sherry casks. And although she's coming around.
Eventually. Yeah.
But Kalila for me is sort of smoked meat and sometimes smoked cheese.
Yeah.
So it's got the smoky, and occasionally more medicinal. Lagavulin has greater depth,
No doubt.
and it's got red fruits, and it's got all sorts of stuff before you get the smoke, and the smokiness is very, very positive. Very, I mean the Malt Advocates course that we talked about, you mentioned earlier on, we would arrange all the Islay whiskies. There were 7 distilleries in those days, and we tried to arrange them for the final tasting at Lagavulin. In the range of smokiness. So you'd go, Bruichladdich, Bunnahabhain, Bowmore, whatever, and even the big pungent ones like Ardbeg didn't come across as, or indeed the Octomore. I mean, Bruichladdich Octomore, didn't come across as in on the mouth, the palate, as smoky as Lagavulin 16.
Yeah.
But it was a very sophisticated smokiness.
It's a much more integrated smoke.
It's just
and it is. And smoke is the phenols within smoke deliver in so many different ways. It can be toasted marshmallows.
Yeah.
It can be rubbers. It can be burning grass. There are so many ways that smoke. And actually, even you see that in Lefroy. Actually, you see a mossy kind of green smoke sometimes coming through.
Well. I mean, Lefroy for me, often the young Lefroy is coal smoke.
Yeah.
And it's a full on. If you really want a full on impact.
Yeah.
And that's why they it was either you Marmite. You love it or hate it.
Yeah.
Marmite's a great analogy. I always say that with Islay whiskey.
Yeah.
But Lagavulin it's the sophisticated Islay. I always, when we used to do tastings with Lagavulin and things, and people would ask, well, help us understand where Lagavulin sits in terms of Islay style, and I'm like, look, it's really the Petrus of Islay. It's this sophisticated, elegant at times, but bold at times, and it depends on what one you're tasting. But generally, I think that's what it is. It's a bit of a mythical beast, and it's delicious. It is delicious. It's like I say, it's not my chosen Islay single malt, and I think the reason is because it is a little bit too complex sometimes. You don't sit back and have a couple of glasses of Lagavulin and don't really think about it. You actually have to engage mentally a little bit academically almost to sort of go,
It's tough for you, mate.
oh, it is tough. Yeah, it is. It's like it's a thinking whiskey. There's no doubt about it.
Well, see, if you're capable of thinking,
I'm not. That's the problem.
I'm thinking
Nice dig there, Charlie.
after the bells. I was going to say. You know,
Well, yeah, I'm especially
If
not
you want-
capable.
if you
of
No,
want-
no, just
something-
don't say after the bell.
Yeah,
Just stop
yeah.
there. That's good.
a contemplative whiskey. You see,
Yeah.
maybe Lagavulin would be one. And I must say that we're looking at this. It's a 13-year-old.
This is the Jazz Festival edition that we did. We talked about.
We just talked about it. It just got
couple of
released.
episodes. Yeah. So honestly, I can't remember. I did a whole tasting note thing on it, but I can't remember what we said and
It's
what we talked about.
54.8% alcohol.
Yeah.
A bottle for this year, 13 years old, and as you say, it was bottled to celebrate the jazz festival. And I must say, I think it's a cracking dram. I haven't tasted it until now, and it's lovely texture, lovely mouthfeel.
But Charlie, have you heard that Isla are gonna change the Jazz Festival next year to the Daz Festival?
Oh, there we go. I like it. Yeah.
Great. And what
a good idea.
What will be your obligations?
Every single Isla whiskey will just have a release with Daz's face on it.
Well, let's go back. You mentioned something there that, and this is what Hogmanay means. I think when I think about Hogmanay, you talk about contemplative whiskey, a whiskey where you sit and you actually think. Hogmanay is not all about looking forward. You do have to look back a little bit, don't you? And it's quite a nostalgic thing. You reminisce. You think of the people that you may have lost that year. I'm not at the bells. I like to sit on my own, actually. I'm not one for going around high-fiving everyone and hugging everyone. I kind of like to be on my own, just have a little think about what's happened the year before, maybe some of the stuff that's going to happen at the time. But yeah, it's happy. But it's also a bit sad. It's a double-edged sword.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean, and this is definitely as a contemplative whiskey. So it's not when you're roaring around and visiting people. Hey, you wouldn't want to share this because this is just for a couple of good friends. And it is contemplative, and and I think by that time by post midnight. You're looking for a positive and obvious flavour, smoky in this case, and you might also. I would think of Glendronach. I'm a great fan of the Allardyce.
Yeah,
it's 18.
That's the 18.
Glendronach 18. Fantastic whiskey, big sherry style, and I'm also the third one that I would throw in is, which I'm also a great fan of, is. Glen Scotia's, what do they call it?
Is it the Victoriana?
Victoriana.
Yeah.
No age statement, but it's a lovely whiskey.
Stunning whiskey.
It really is. It's a cracker.
But they've. I was chatting with a couple of the guys at Glen Scotia just yesterday, and reviewing their year almost. Just sort of talking out loud to one another, going, "Look, you've distillery of the year." 25-year-old won single malt whiskey of the year.
Yeah, I know. What a record!
Every list of top 10s and top 20s, there's a Glen Scotia in there. I went to the Black Cat on Rose Street a couple of weeks ago. I was just doing some work from there, and I thought, I'm going to order a wee whiskey. I got chatting to the guy, and he was like, have you tried the Glen Scotia seasonal edition, or whatever it's called? And, it was a blockbuster. Yeah. I mean, I was kind of taken aback just by the quality. And Glen Scotia as a distillery, flying the flag for Campbelltown, as Springbank have done almost on their own for so long. It's superb. I mean, really.
Yeah, I think
they've done a fantastic
definitely
job.
0 to hero for this year.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure zero. Zero's hard.
Yeah.
That's harsh, Mitch.
They're old school distillery, but for I think presence within the whiskey world, this year's been an amazing year for them.
Yeah,
good for them. I mean, they're producing some good stuff, and Ian McAllister's a lovely guy.
So, Charlie, we're going to finish off here, but one of the things we do in the episode is interesting facts will not get you any friends in the bar about whiskey. Now it's time for some interesting whiskey facts that definitely won't get you any new friends on a Friday or Saturday night while standing in a bar. might work on a Monday or Tuesday though.
Many years ago, I was stalking, shooting deer up at stags up on Speyside. I took my stag. I was with the chief stalker, and we went back. I killed my beast, thank God, cleanly, and we went back to his house. And it was about tea time, about 5 o'clock, and he handed me a bottle, an unlabelled bottle, standard liquor bottle of brown spirit. Right, come on. You think you know about whiskey? Tell me what this is. You see, and so I poured dram, and what I can say by the colour that it's come from, it's a single cask bottling. It comes from a European oak ex-sherry cask, and I would guess it's about 12 years old. And it's a cask strength. It's a natural strength, obviously, and I knew that the nearest distillery to that particular place was Glenfarclas, and at that time they were selling casks. I said, and I think it's a Glenfarclas, you see. So then, an hour or so later, my host who invited me to go stalking with the junior stalker, who was a guy called Willie Grant, who was 86 years old, and the wonderful guy. And so and Brian Hamilton poured drams for these and said, "Come on, Willie, tell us what this is." And he said the first thing he did was to shake it vigorously. You see
the beading. And,
And then he looked at the colour and said, it's a sherry cask, and then he shook it and he says, I would guess maybe 55% alcohol and the natural strength. And then he tasted it. He says, it's a Glenfarclas and it's 12 years old.
No.
And he was right in every particular, And I said, Willie, what's this business about shaking the bottle? He says, you think yourself a whiskey expert, he says, and you don't care about the beading, and and I said, well, no, tell me about it. And of course, later I discovered that this was a very primitive way of assessing quality, because you do not get bead under about 30% alcohol, and so it tells you that it's high strength. But also, if the beads linger on the surface of the liquid, it tells you age. Because you can shake a bottle of new make spirit at 62, whatever, and it fizzes up and it disappears. The interesting fact is that if you shake a bottle of spirits, you'll learn an awful lot just from the appearance. And if you do it in a posh restaurant, and when the carte de vin or all the digestives come in, and you start shaking the brandies, shaking the Armagnacs, and shaking the whiskey, and the sommelier is horrified.
Yeah.
So there you go, guys. Interesting fact from Charlie MacLean that probably will get you some new friends in a bar.
You can just show them. You
Exactly.
might lose a few friends in the sommelier and bartending.
What the fuck are you doing in my bottle?
Yeah. Stop shaking my bottles.
Well, Charlie, thank you so much for being on the episode.
Boys.
Really appreciate your time, as always. Amazing to chat to you.
It's been absolutely great. It's been lovely. It really has been.
A few nice drams to bring in the bells with as well.
Yeah, good way to spend a wee day in December, right?
Yeah.
I hope so. Yeah.
Great to see you, my friend.
God bless you. Cheers,
Slange.
cheers. I've still got my my blood and sand.
Oh,
Bloody hell. Get that drunk, Charlie.
was it that bad?